Welcome to the show. Today's topic, sexuality when you have disabilities. Really important topic, and Dale Monro is going to talk to me about that. You're not going to want to miss the show. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the show, and today's topic is a delicate one with Dale Monro, and harnessing sexuality when you have disabilities. I think it's really important as a human being to be able to honor and respect that and own it. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Nice having you.
It's a huge topic because there's a huge amount of people out there that do have disabilities, whether it's mental disabilities or physical disabilities. We all are human beings, and we have a sexual core in us. And when you're working with people, let's just kind of break it up a little bit. So people with physical disabilities that still think sexy and they still think that they're wanting to be aroused, how do you work with those types of disabilities?
Well, I think you have to think about what is the best way for them to express their love to each other or to themselves. And I think that with people with physical disabilities, you may have to change the way they make love to ways that they can give each other pleasure, and maybe through different kinds of touch or physical sensation, maybe through smell. You know, you can have aromas, you can have, but a lot of it is, you know, forgetting about genitalia sometimes and worry about just people expressing love in many different ways. Holding hands, hugging each other, you know, finding ways to do acts of kindness for each other. The big kahuna is, you know, I call it, is where you're actually having sexual intercourse. But there's, you know, and the other way that's really important for people with disabilities, of all disabilities, is the importance of masturbation as an option if they have no partner or their partner's ill or something like that.
Does that seem to be kind of a hindrance with a lot of people with disabilities, that they don't feel like doing it because they don't feel like they deserve because they are disabled? People
in our society are so uptight about masturbation. Some of it comes from religious beliefs, some of it just comes from society. But I think it's something that should be an option for every man and woman and every teenager. You know, it's really important. And for people, say, with intellectual disabilities, autism, Asperger's, they also want to find love and want to get married and have kids and all that type of thing. So all people with all kinds of labels of disability deserve a right and a need to have their needs met.
So getting back to the masturbating, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get aroused to an erection, because maybe there's a disability there where they can't. They can still feel aroused even if they're not getting hard.
Well, it's interesting. Some people, even if they can't touch themselves, can roll over on their stomach and stimulate themselves. And there's many different ways that people with disabilities. There's also a couple of videos by Dave Hinsberger on teaching people, you know, men with disabilities how to masturbate. It's called Handmade Love. Or also for women with disabilities, called fingertips, in terms of how they can pleasure themselves. Again, many people with disabilities also have partners. But there's a sense of loneliness for a lot of people, and they need that, you know, that sexual release.
Is there a misconception in our culture or in our society where people with disabilities can't be sexual or can't
there's this feeling that they aren't sexual beings or that they are asexual, and that's absolute bull roar. And I think that there's the feeling that they can't benefit from sex education, which is bull roar.
Well, sexuality doesn't start there. It starts right in between the ears.
That's right. And it starts right from birth. And so what we're looking at, I deal with people, you know, children that are 5 years old, although I work with their parents. And then I deal with 70-year-olds that just got their diagnosis of, say, Asperger's or autism. And it's interesting that all of them have had many misconceptions about how they can pleasure themselves.
So when you're working with their parents, what types of things are they learning when they know that their child is disabled, to educate them in the sexuality category?
We have to do a lot of educational work with parents. We need to let them know that their children are sexual beings. We need to let them know that you can try to protect them in the ground and not let them have exposure to, you know, other people their own age and things like that. If you protect them too much, it makes them more vulnerable to being abused. And we know that people, say, with developmental disabilities are mistreated at least 10 times as much as the general public.
Wow.
And sexual abuse is 1.5 times as much as the general public. So if you want to protect your child into the ground, and you have a daughter, say, with Down syndrome, by protecting her and not giving her sex education and not doing things like this, it makes her more vulnerable to abuse.
Okay, so someone with Down syndrome, what types of things are we learning about that disability to educate them?
For instance,
to be able to embrace their sexuality.
I've helped several people with Down syndrome get married, and all the couples I've worked with have never broken up. So we've never had a separation or divorce for many of the people.
Amazing.
But people with Down syndrome, you know, people with Asperger's syndrome, people, you know, with cerebral palsy. All can have very happy married lives filled with love and pleasure. And I think that, but the general public may not know that.
Right.
These people are all around us,
Yeah,
but we
they
just
are.
don't see them.
Yeah, sexuality has nothing to do with sex, and I think it's a healthy place to be able to embrace it in the mind,
Yes.
even to create the fantasy. I mean, if you're disabled, doesn't mean you can't watch TV or watch, you know, some sexy movie and feel that human connection of that energy, that element.
Or have an imaginary friend. And a lot of times in the past we've said, isn't this wild, they have an imaginary friend, they must be psychotic. They're not psychotic, they're not sick at all. They just don't have a lot of people in their lives, so they create an imaginary friend or even idealized partner that gives them a sense of, breaks their loneliness. It gives them a sense of love and feeling some sense of worth.
They can talk to their...
But it's not psychotic, and,
No.
and I have to often tell parents or even support people that you know, this is a normal thing for people if they're a little bit isolated.
Yeah, I think that that's a huge one when the parents don't understand.
Yes.
But I think we're kind of out of the old, you know, dinosaur days.
A little bit. But
Are we a little bit?
I think we have a long ways to go. I think that
I
we have moved forward.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, for instance, we know now there's lots of people with autism that are transgender.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, a huge number. We know that there's gay and lesbian, bisexual people with all kinds of disabilities, from intellectual disabilities to autism, Asperger's, to physical disabilities, to mental health issues. And it's not a mental health issue to have that, but they may have, you know, severe depression, anxiety, and so that can be an issue too.
Yeah, I think it's important. Well, if they're gay or lesbian, to have the LGBT, the community, the queer community.
We need community.
And to have, but they're not educated enough to know how to deal with their sexuality when they're disabled. So it's nice to have the balance.
Sometimes we even have to help the gay and lesbian, bisexual community understand how they can support young people.
Right.
And so I know, say in Toronto, there's groups set up for gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual people that have intellectual or autism or physical or mental health disabilities.
The abuse part that you mentioned before about just the percentage and how disabled people are more prone to it, because so where are they getting abuse from?
Almost always someone they know. Like, I think families always worry that the abuse is going to be from somebody, you know, that they've never met, that's kind of, you know...
Is it what kind of abuse? It's sexual abuse?
Physical abuse, sexual abuse, and it's almost always a babysitter. It could be a parent, it could be a grandparent, it could be an uncle, it could be a next-door neighbor. But it's almost never some kind of criminal that's out there skulking around society.
And is it because they know that the person's disabled, so that it's just taking advantage?
That's right.
Hey.
One of the people with autism said in one of their papers that people with disabilities are like a predator magnet. And again, I'm not trying to scare people out there. What I'm saying is these young people that have a disability really need sex education. They really need to know how to set up boundaries in their life so people don't cross those boundaries. Yeah. And even people with intellectual disabilities, maybe that aren't as intelligent as the general public, can learn these things.
Right.
And so it's really important. Sex education doesn't encourage sexual behavior. It actually teaches people what's appropriate and what isn't.
That's interesting. And I mean, being mentally disabled, as opposed to physically disabled. Those two sensations are totally different when you're feeling aroused.
Yes.
I mean, you can still feel aroused without feeling it in the genitals.
Yes.
So I think that
when you're in love.
Yeah,
that's I like to talk about love more than I like to talk about
sex. That's in the head. That's the
true.
sexual energy in the head.
That's in your head. It's in your whole body.
Yeah.
It's in your relationship, the way you view other people, and maybe your partner, whoever that is. And so it can be, incredibly important in that area.
So we need to take a little break right now, and on that note, that nice little pause, and we're going to get back to some more topics on what you passionately are practicing. Be right back. Welcome back to the show with Dale Monro, and touching on sexuality with disabilities. And I'm kind of curious, and with couples that are both disabled, how do they learn to engage with their each individual disability? Well,
it's interesting. I published an article in an American book a couple of years ago, and then I gave it to some family therapists that work with the general public. And they said it's almost the same thing.
Oh.
You're trying to improve communication between the couple. You're trying to improve intimacy and all the ways you can define that. You're trying to give them permission to do things. Therapists give permission. I tell people, you got to join a fitness group. You got to take better care of your hygiene. Hygiene is a big issue for people with disabilities.
It's huge.
And in making love, but just in being close in any way. Therapy is all about reframing. I had a couple both had a disability, and the woman got diabetes diagnosed, and the other person was angry about it. I don't want my wife having diabetes. And I said, it's actually an advantage. I reframed in a positive way.
Right.
Diabetes is an advantage because what it does is it allows you both an opportunity to get in better shape.
Cool.
So a couple of sessions later, they came in and the man said, this diabetes has turned out to be an advantage. And it was almost like he was wording what I'd said 2 sessions before.
Right.
And so we can reframe things in a way that can make people healthier. But the #1 rule of couples is having fun. The first rule.
That's pretty crucial.
Yes.
I mean, if you're not having fun on the outside, how can you actually engage in fun lovemaking?
That's right.
The fun part is you're like.
You got to goof. You got to be silly. You got to be goofy.
Goofy.
Even in therapy, I want to say things I tell young therapists is the therapy should be fun, and that makes half the work is done. Just making things fun for the couple. So we joke, we laugh, we have fun, we got goofy. I hit them with puns, and then we talk serious about things that are serious.
So if you're not with anybody when you have a disability, but you have a need and a yearning for it, how would you date, or how would you find somebody out there in the world?
Well, I know a couple of people, say with Asperger's syndrome I've been working with recently, the last couple of years. And the one man had never been on a date, and he was like 29 years old. And he went on Plenty of Fish.
Really?
Met a woman from England.
Internet dating.
Internet. They dated online for about 6 months. She finally came over to visit because they were clicking. It went well. And on New Year's Eve that year, I got an email from his mother with the wedding pictures. And I'd quit working because he'd made great progress in the therapy. I got another couple I've been working with, he'd met his wife, again, Plenty of Fish, but any one of the online dating sites. How do people in general meet people in this world? Not people with disabilities, everybody. It's online dating is a huge part of how we do that.
Seems to be a huge way of connecting.
But I want to talk briefly about this couple. The man has cerebral palsy and the woman has an intellectual disability. They've been married over 30 years. And they have fun every day. They play cards. They have all these games they play. And they're both physically quite held back, but it doesn't stop their love.
So when they have physical love, have they been coached somehow?
To some degree. They'll let me talk to them about as much as far as I don't think they have a lot of genitalia love.
Okay.
I think they have a lot of closeness and hugging and doing things together. And to be honest, think about when you're in high school and dating. Some of the sexiest stuff you can do in the world is just hanging out and being close. And maybe not having sex, but just, just the excitement of being together.
For sure, yeah. It could be stimulating. It could be reinventing
the way people make out in a car, maybe more sexual than any other way you ever make out.
Talking about it.
Yes.
And these disabilities can be very empowering when it comes to educating the general public because we don't know. I mean, a lot of us don't know how much of a benefit they're educating us on the whole spectrum.
There's a famous person, Jean Vanier, who's Canadian, but he's worked a lot with people with disabilities all over the world. And he says, people with disabilities aren't tragedies or accidents of nature. They're our teachers.
They're gifts.
They're gifts to us.
Yep.
And what can they teach us about love? First of all, people with disabilities teach us that materialism is crap. Mm-hmm. Like our world, people build their marriages over getting more and more stuff. And a lot of times after a while they get bored with it and then they break up.
Right.
People with disabilities teach us that lower your expectations. Don't try to have perfect sex, be a perfect parent, try to have a perfect career, because that kills you.
Yeah.
If you can keep your expectations lower, you can be married a lot longer. And I think, or be together a lot longer in a happier way. I think people with disabilities can teach us that, again, fun. The people
exactly. I was going to say, because we seem to be, as people with no disabilities, we're so stuck and focused on the genitals. So this is where the sexual fun is, so we can learn from them.
A lot of them, like people with autism, have sensory needs. The way they hear the world, feel the world. So they teach the general public, be very sensitive to your partner's sensory issues.
Right.
The way they want to be spoken to, the way they want to be touched. Because some people can't handle a huge amount of touch.
Right.
Or it has to be done very carefully, very slowly. And they also teach us not everybody finds a partner. And there's two groups I want to focus on. There's people, a small group, just a small group of people with disabilities that are more asexual. They don't want to have sex with anybody. And some of them don't have a lot of sexual feeling even from the earliest age. So the most pleasurable thing for them is not to have much involvement sexually. Now that's rare, but there's a group of, especially people with autism and Asperger's like that. And I think that, but beyond that, I think it's people with disabilities can teach us that there's an authentic kind of love.
Back to authenticity.
Yes. That doesn't have a lot to do with the way society views sexuality in kind of the media and things like that.
Interesting.
And, but I've continually learned things from the people. I've been in the field 44 years now.
You're dedicated.
But I love it. I love seeing people's lives get better. It's really fun to help people that way.
Well, sexuality is like a huge a link in the chain of life, and
yes.
I think when it's missing, and it's a large link in that, and if you have that out of the chain, it's very, very weak. Your life and your whole being is not as full as it should be. Mm-hmm. So sexuality not meaning sex, but you have to be tender and you have to be intimate and even spiritually connected with the source of sensations.
Some of the people with disabilities are some of the most spiritual people in the world.
I'm sure.
And they really have a lot of them have a sense of joy and fun to them that people that are working 60 hours a week and things like that just never experience.
I know.
And I'm not trying to idealize being disabled because it's not easy for people sometimes, but a lot of them can be, they can have very good sexual lives. I know several people with Asperger's syndrome that have great sex lives.
Right.
Like in terms of genitalia and being close and having fun and things like that. And I think that through history we've tried to avoid people with disabilities so much, when really we should be learning from them.
I think there's a lot to learn from them. I mean, we are learning. I practice in the Eastern philosophies of Tantra and getting back into sensory, getting back into intimacy, getting back into spiritual sex and slow, just being present. So what what I understand with my practice, people coming to learn all that, they can learn it from a whole different part of society.
Yes.
And it's always been there.
And I think that, again, the sexiest thing in life, you know, Masters and Johnson used to talk about sensate focus, which is kind of like what you're talking about a little bit, although you're taking it maybe to another level. But just the idea of cuddling and hugging, and especially when you're under terrible stress. The one thing I know is you don't really want to make love in the traditional sense when you're under stress. You need to be hugged. You need to be cuddled. You need things done for you, acts of service. There's a nice little book called The 5 Love Languages, and it really translates in very well for working with people with disabilities or anybody else. And it really talks about, you know, acts of kindness. Some people need more physical love than others, it says. You know, the whole idea of doing service for other people.
Right.
And but I really do believe that people with disabilities, you know, why do I work with them? Because they invigorate my life.
I'm positively sure about that. I mean, cuddling is a huge place where you can get reawakened again with just the whole intimate love. And it brings emotions. It brings awareness of how you're feeling in the embrace. All those feelings that generate sexuality, it can generate that.
And how can we hug people? There's different ways. We can hug them with the way we look at them, with kindness. We can hug them by the way we talk to them in a gentle way. We can hug people by listening rather than talking all the time. That's the sexiest thing in the world, is to listen.
Well, you're surrounding them with all of that. It's an embrace. That's a hug.
It is, and some people say with autism can't handle a lot of touch.
Right.
But you can still hug them with your eyes and your voice and listen to what they're saying and being positive. Having a positive frame of mind.
So that they know that they're in a safe, cuddling embrace. It's fantastic work that you do. I'm glad I actually found you.
Well, I love what I'm doing, and I like sharing it with other people.
I'm thinking that it's just your calling. It's something that you're going to do forever, and it's something that you can do forever. And it's great having you on the show.
My pleasure.
Today, and I learned a lot. I have my brother's wife has someone with a disability as her son, and I think it's, you know, the more information and people that work with disabilities is really important to have that out there. Great. We'll be right back. Thanks for watching the show today. It was awesome having Dale Monro speaking with me on sexuality with disabilities. And if you have any questions that you want to email me directly at sexwithdrzen@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.